If I'm not mistaken, I believe I got Nick Khan into the wrestling business, if I'm not
Did
mistaken.
you really?
I believe
Let's
so.
hear this.
And I've known Nick for about 20 years. Nick's a friend. Nick's the one who got me into ESPN.
Nick's an old Hawaii guy from The Rock. Because everybody saw the video, like The Rock and Nick and Rock.
Yeah, I never knew that. Nick Khan is on the very, very short list of the smartest people I have met in show business.
Yeah.
Nick Khan, the minute we email, Nick's a buddy. If I were to go and do business at some point, it would probably be with Nick. Like my interest in, again, I have a good relationship with Triple H and Stephanie, but my interest in anything because of Nick being there.
What are the chances of getting Nick Khan on this podcast?
Very low.
Very low. No, low. It's very low.
How about since you're here, Ryan Reynolds?
Yeah, that's probably even lower. I can say that. I could probably get some fun.
Typical wrestler, right? You're friends with Ryan Reynolds.
Yeah,
get him on the podcast.
But Nick Khan, like, if there is any, and I understand fans have no clue. They don't know who he is. If there is anybody,
but they do now.
Vince is gone, that will rock it with that company. Nick Khan. Again, Nick Khan. I called Nick. I had set up a series of movies, and they were going to take forever. They had 3 homes, never ended up going. But I had written these series of 10 movies based on the old AIP library, and I'm like, I got to sit and wait because they're supposedly going to go in Singapore, but I got to find something to do. So I go sit down with Nick, who I've known since he was at BWC. You understand? Like Nick was at Broder. They got bought by ICM.
The guy was Colin Howard's agent.
Yeah, he built the entire
this guy's like got his fingers into everything.
So half the guys Max Kellerman, half the guys I worked with at ESPN were Nick guys. Right. Marcellus, half of these guys.
Right.
Nick built that entire division. He built it into a job. CAA poached him, and he built it theirs into a
creative arts agency.
Yes, basically. Which is the big.
So he was so Nick. Wait, he was a big player in that too.
Nick Khan, Nick was at Broder, and I think I'm trying to. So basically, Nick was at Broder, Webb, Shervin, Silverman, which was a boutique agency. They were acquired by ICM. I had met him when he was at Broder, and if I'm not mistaken, I introduced him to Jay Riso, Christian, and because I played a bit of a role in jumping Christian to TNA. The idea of that, because I consulted for TNA at a point after you had been gone. I've had my hands around interesting.
Had your fingers and stuff.
Report to Dixie or Jeff or Vince?
I'm Dixie and her husband took me to lunch and basically were like, would you consult for us? And then she was always cool to me. I pissed her off, I think, early on. I was honest. I told her not to hire Hogan. I was like,
you and Vince.
AEW, I got a call from my agent.
How was your relationship with Russo?
I only talked to him once or twice on the phone. Very nice. But
really?
After wrestling. Yeah. He was working on something. He had heard my name. It was like a wrestling comedy thing. And I was like, full disclosure, I'm working on it.
Your paths never crossed, really, basically.
No. But I about 9 months before AEW launched, I got a call from my agent being like, hey, there's this company that wants to sit down with you. Will you go sit down with them? It's a wrestling thing. And I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. And they're like, do it. As a favor. And I went, okay, I did it. And I didn't know at the time, but it was there. I don't remember the name of the management company, but it's owned by the Khans. And they were running the Burt Productions. I know Keith Mitchell, I think I had read, was doing production for them. But at least at this point, Bernie Cahill, who I have known since he was at Roar, and I put Rampage Jackson in the A-team back in the day when I was at Fox, he was running this division for the Khans. And they actually brought me in and were sort of picking my brain about what they were launching. I don't remember having to sign an NDA or anything. But the one piece of advice I gave them that I don't, and you guys know better than I, but it doesn't seem like they're doing, and it seems like a mistake, just given the events of the last week, because I thought the Cody Rhodes business was a brilliant piece of business for Vince to show to other talent, look what we can do if you come over, we'll treat you well. The anti-Sting move. Right. Imagine that. But I said to them, I was like, listen, you could sign, whatever talent you want, but you better have at least 4 or 5 characters that you own 100%. They're your creations. You own the underlying IP. So they're the Undertaker. So if Mark Calloway wants to go to WCW, he could go, but he might be the death dealer, although probably not after the Ray Traylor lawsuit. But he can't be the Undertaker. Right. You own and as you can see, Vince is going to monetize the Undertaker. Whoever owns that, Nick will monetize it long after Mark is gone, and the Calloway estate will be making money off of it, etc. My understanding from when I look at Reddit and you guys, and I look at Meltzer's news thing a couple times a week, it looks to me like everybody they sign is playing their characters or their names that they were before. That's a mistake. You need to at least have 4 or 5 of those guys. I don't care if the gimmicks bomb. If you watch my show that I did, like Glenn is an example, everybody, it's Kenny Omega. It's a good roster of talent. Like, for all my faults, I have a pretty good eye for talent. And this is early on in their runs. I think I'm the first person to push Kenny as a heavyweight champion. They're all playing characters that are, there's no WWE in the universe. They all are unique, original characters, and I own them. So even in failure, I own that IP. And if I wanted to make a video game with Kenny Omega and those guys today, he'd have to be Cornerstone Scott Carpenter. Right. I could do it. And so AEW to not do that, given that he can afford it, to do it and do it well, that seems like a mistake.
You're absolutely correct on that, because that's the one thing about AAA. They own a lot of IPs.
Well, that's what you and I were talking, right?
Yeah. Well, perfect example is
you own La Parka or whatever, right? Like,
it's like, dude, it's like they get these people. It's like basically, it's like they're not AEW is the not WWE brand. Right. Okay, we're not WWE, so we're WWE, and we're the not even the we're just the other brand.
Alternative.
So it's like, but what they've done is they've taken the talent pool which is left. The people that aren't in the WWE system, that haven't been, something, they take the other talent pool that's left from the indies, and they just basically just put them on TV. It's like
a huge roster, right? It's a lot of people.
That's what I'm saying. So it's like, but I'm saying is like, you didn't take this talent and say, okay, we're going to take you guys, put you through our marketing program, our art divisions, everything. We're going to make you. They said, okay, here's so and so that wrestled in front of 200 people the other day, and it's like we're hiring them, and like, okay, here's your character, you're yourself wearing your stuff. They wrestle in front of 200 people. Now you're wrestling in front of 4,000 people and an audience of 1 million people.
Yeah,
and it's like
you basic business to me.
If you don't think the visual of the fan is going to look and say like, this is like an amateur player on my television right now, which is
explain to me. You guys watch the show. So Samoa Joe, good friend of mine. I love him. Rooting for. I'm more likely to like. I'll watch some of his eventually.
Right.
Love Joe. They have a gigantic roster from everything I can tell. Like, how are they managing this?
How do you keep adding? It's backwards booking. They literally take, like, the past 3 months of television, this is no lie, 35 to 48 different characters have been in the main event on their shows. Okay, and it's like,
how do you get anybody over?
You think you're getting them over because they're in the main event, and like the people that's I think the mindset is, because like you're thinking like, dude, you have a bunch of main eventers and the rest of the second and third matches on the show, and your mid-carders are resting the main event. And it's like, you're not going to give a perception of a big show feel that way, So I don't know. Like
I think you gotta,
that's the way it comes across to me,
Again, like I always heard MJ. There's a bunch of guys. I want them to do well. Like
there is a bunch of guys
there,
and they're never in the events.
Take 3 or 4 and just go. Hey, we're going to character you, and even if it doesn't work, there's 6
or 7 guys you can put on a top level and say we can do a ton of storyline in between these guys, everything, and like we're good. This is going to be the top of our card. But it's like,
how many of their top guys are homegrown versus ex-WWE? Out of curiosity, off the top of your head,
none of them are homegrown.
That's a problem too to me,
because they're all from MLW, Impact. There's nothing straight. There's not a straight homegrown Raw character on that show. And it's like, and then we're supposed to perceive them as big deals because they've wrestled on the indies and on the internet.
Doesn't know a casual fan who's flipping through TNT after the NBA and sees an ad, like they don't know MLW. Like, so at least
they see Jericho, they see Moxley, they see
they have a couple. They have a couple homegrown guys. The thing is that one of the other problems that they have, Jeff, is that they don't book them properly, and right there you're already. So one of the big things that we were complaining about is when CM Punk came in and he got a humongous ovation, and he should, and
it's a huge deal.
Punk's a big number I saw.
Right, and like one of the first guys he was wrestling, I forget, it might have been Daniel Garcia.
Yeah, I've heard his name. I've never seen.
Right. So it's like my thing is, I always say, for example, do you watch UFC?
I mean, not as much. I used to be a very hardcore UFC back more in like the Chuck and Randy.
But you watch you'll watch a big show.
I watch a big fight.
All right,
if you're going to say that you match them up in a big prize fight,
like you might not watch this weekend. You might not watch this weekend, but you'll watch when like the two.
Right, like
it's like boxing. If there's a big time fight, I want to watch once a year. I'm going to watch the big fight.
After what happened between, let's say, Jorge Masvidal and Colby Covington,
if they fight again,
people would like to see a rematch. But if all of a sudden it was Jorge Masvidal versus Jeff Katz. Right. People are like, who the wants to see that
my
fight?
My parents wouldn't pay to see that.
Right. So that's what they do there a lot.
Okay.
You know, they don't give you the big matchups, and then their excuse is, well, we're trying to give the rub to other people. Okay, you have time to give people the rub. Let's give people. You got to get people to watch the show.
Strike while it's hot is basically
you hired strong stocks.
Right.
It's like
so we have CM Punk versus Kenny Omega.
Right. Where's the Amazon versus Nike? We don't want to see Amazon versus the Target. You know.
Did they do Danielson versus Omega? I know Kenny's hurt. Did they do Danielson versus Omega?
No, you hurt.
No, yeah, they did it his first match.
Okay, they did. Okay,
they did.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so at least
they did it on Dynamite.
But they don't do enough of that.
If it was me, anyone new that comes in, if Kenny is the face, to me, like Punk versus I've seen Hangman Page now a couple matches because people on Reddit were like, you got to see him. He's fine. I don't quite get him in that.
Me neither. Me neither. So and he's our champion, and when I see him, I'm
he's not going to make anybody.
There's five other guys that should be champion.
You could replace him with James. You could replace him with James Storm. Do the exact same gimmick, cowboy drinking beer and everything, and you wouldn't miss it. You wouldn't really miss a beat.
I'm someone that thinks Danielson is more valuable than Punk in the long term. Personally, that's no knock on Punk.
I do too. I said that. Me and Conan.
He's coming off of WrestleMania and WWE television.
Yeah. Danielson's been incredible. He's been incredible.
Years ago,
I've heard nothing but great stuff.
The guy a couple years ago drew a number on Friday night on SmackDown, a good number against Roman.
Yeah, I've never met him, but I have a lot of respect for him.
And like Bryan Danielson, it's like okay, you should take this guy. He's a hot commodity, you know. It's like,
but he's like Brett. You can put him in with anybody they have on their roster, and you know he's going to figure out how to have a good match with him.
Right.
Yeah. And so that's how you
good
make
on the mic
guys.
too. Yeah.
That's how you do the Flair thing, where you're going to give a guy a little bit and give him a glimmer of hope, and before you beat him, Danielson's a guy who knows how to do that perfectly, and has the credibility to actually give a guy a rub and do it.
But he shouldn't be wrestling. He shouldn't be wrestling Wheeler Utah and Chuck.
I don't know who that.
He should be. That's what I'm saying.
That's the guy you call Johnny Utah.
They put these guys against nobodies. They put these guys against these nobodies, and it's like, damn, man. It's like I like Bryan Danielson, but I want to see if he gets a more credible, like a bigger guy. You know,
I'll do a full show of theirs eventually. I am overdue to do it, and I do root for them. So any of these are constructive, just based on what I see on Reddit.
I like watching. The thing is, with wrestling today, we kind of have to watch the shows. Raw, I cannot watch. It's 3 hours. Nobody can watch a 3 hour wrestling show.
No show. There's 3 hours too long.
So I watched a 30-minute condensed version of that. I watched SmackDown. I've actually.
You guys are high on SmackDown, right? I think
we were high on Roman, Sami Zayn, Seth. They were doing some good stuff with characters over a prolonged period of time.
And Heyman is unbelievable. Heyman is facial stuff.
Bro, if you could go on YouTube, Jeff, because you say you don't watch wrestling. Mm-hmm. If you go on YouTube and you watch the last year, somebody's got to have it, or somebody could send it to you. The last year of just every time Roman Reigns and Paulie and the Usos came out. It's incredible. It's
on Reddit, they'll put little clips up. They'll be like 30-second clips. Right. So I've seen bits because, again, Paul's a friend. Like Conan. It's not an accident that when I put my footage online at the beginning of COVID and I did a little quick credit thing. The only two people I gave you and Paul special thanks. Like your influences on me. Paul's a friend. Like Paul is so under. I watched WrestleMania last year. I watched the first night, and then I watched just the main event after the fact to watch. That was the Edge and Daniel Bryan, right? And I had to text Paul because the match was fire. Paul's facials,
incredible,
are masterful. He's maybe the best I've ever seen.
And Roman is piggybacked off that.
Okay, well, so this show at Mania, he's going, "Rise, my tribal." I was popping like crazy.
Their whole interaction is getting so much mileage out of everything they do with the facials, the looks and stuff. And then Roman's figured that out too.
And Major League.
You have two guys that are on TV at the same time producing high quality television. And in a climate of wrestling where a lot of guys look amateurish.
I would also
which is why that show does more numbers than any other wrestling show on television.
This WrestleMania was my first exposure to McAfee as well, and I became
unbelievable.
He's hilarious, and he makes Michael Cole, who I think has been a robot for 20 years. That's the most alive and natural I've ever heard. I became a fan.
You haven't watched him on the weekly TV because just like Roman Paul, his facials are perfect, his acting is perfect.
But he's also it's a little edgy. It's a little
edgy.
Humor.
He's outside the box because he has a lot of other fans that are bringing. He has fans outside the wrestling bubble that will watch him, and he makes
And by the way, that's
performs
100%.
well.
That is a Nick Khan hire. I know Nick. That
Well,
is
let me tell
100%
you,
a Nick
absolutely.
Khan
Jeff,
hire.
can I just say this? That shows how smart Nick is and also Vince. Let me tell you why. Because Vince does two great things. He adapts well. When WCW was kicking his ass, he figured out what it was and he came back. When ECW was the coolest thing around, he figured out what they were doing and then he actually bought it. Yeah, right. So, and the other thing that he does real well is, finding the right guys, because if you surround yourself with idiots, well, that's what you're going to get. But he surrounded himself with guys like Kevin Dunn, like Tony Khan. Like he'll find people and go, okay, this is the guy I need. Because one of Tony Khan's geniuses to me, besides the Pat McAfee, was bringing in a lot of people didn't know who he was till he got there, but I already knew who he was. Bad Bunny. I mean, to get a guy. To get a guy that's that popular, that's a fashionista, who's mega, bro. He went to Mexico City to the biggest soccer stadium we have there, and he sold out so quick they had to do a second date, and they sold that out. He's on fire, bro.
Nick, just the level of credibility that he brings, particularly among television executives. Nick can go to pick your Super Bowl, college football player, whatever. In a sideline. He knows everybody. I was in New York having lunch with Trog Keller, who's the head of talent at ESPN. Nick happened to be in town. He was doing, I think, Mike Francesa's deal when he first either left and came back or whatever that thing was. And he walks into the restaurant, comes up, shakes our hands, give this guy a national show, buys our lunch. Okay, like he knows how to do it. He's got great relationships. And more than that, he has made so many people so much money that in Hollywood, the minute they made the hire, I emailed him immediately. That's the smartest hire that Vince has made since Hogan.
Wow, that's saying a lot.
Yeah,
that's saying a lot.
And I mean it.